Right, grade 12s. I hope you had a good stretch and a good 5 minute break, and you're ready for the next topic, which is on the human resource function. And if you have a look at the slide, you'll see everything that needs to be covered that we'll be looking at under this topic. But if you look on page 20 in your workbook, in your tutoring workbook, you will see a list of everything that is covered in this topic. And the first thing that we need to talk about is the sources of recruitment. Now, you should know that there are internal and external sources of recruitment, and they often ask you to either identify or list internal sources of recruitment or external sources of recruitment. And there are different ways of asking the question. They can give you a scenario in which there are different types of recruitment sources used, and then they can ask you to identify them and to categorize them in terms of whether they are internal or external sources of recruitment. But there is a little problem that sometimes pops up when we do marking at the end of the year. Some sources of recruitment apply for both internal and external, and they don't often give you the mark for repeating the same thing twice. And you'll see when I mention a particular type of recruitment source that I've changed the wording slightly that may benefit you, but when there is something that is applicable to both internal and external recruitment, try as far as possible not to repeat that option, just to minimize your risk of losing that particular mark in that aspect. So let's take a look at the different internal sources of recruitment. And the first one we have over there is internal email or internet, and that happens when your workplace will issue out a document, an email indicating that there is a vacancy available, and that is inside your workplace. So intranet, the term intranet is a network that is only available for people in your organization or in your institution. So only people within the organization or institution will have access to that information. So also important here is that term internal source of recruitment. So internal means inside your organization or inside your business. External means sources from outside of your workplace. So it is important to identify when we look at these internal and external sources of recruitment, why it is internal, because it is only available to people inside your place of work. So that was the first one, the internal internet or emails.
Mr. de Klerk, does that now mean if I should ask the question or answer this question and I say email, will they mark it for me correct if it's if they asked internal recruitment?
So I would say use the wording internal emails to be sure, because we're not 100% sure how they will mark it at the end of the year. So to save yourself the risk of losing that mark, say internal emails, just to protect yourselves against losing that potential mark.
Okay. Now that's important information.
Yeah. Okay, the next one there is internal headhunting. And again, I've used the word internal here. So headhunting is a term that's used quite often. Headhunting is when someone approaches you directly and asks you if you want to fill a vacancy that they might have. So you don't go through an entire process of finding an advertisement for the job and applying for the job. This particular person approaches you directly and offers you a particular position or offers you the opportunity to apply for a particular position. Now, this headhunting can be internal and external. So that's why I've put the words internal headhunting there. So somebody within your organization that approaches you directly and asks you to come and work for their department. So for example, if I am working in the finance department and I have a particular set of skills, perhaps the marketing department notices those set of skills and they approach me directly and ask me, don't you rather want to come and work for the marketing department instead of the finance department? So then I've been headhunted. If I take that available position, then I've been headhunted internally. So somebody from inside the business has headhunted me. So that is internal headhunting, but important there, the word internal again. Okay, because headhunting can be internal and external, just like the email can be internal and external. The next one is a business newsletter. So the business might make use of a newsletter, and in that newsletter, they will make it known to everybody that there are particular positions available in the business. Then you have workplace notice boards. So some businesses like to put vacancies on the notice board so that everybody walking past inside the workplace has access to view that information there. And then finally, word of mouth. And again, this can happen with people inside your business. So one manager tells another manager that I've got somebody working for me that shows potential and leadership skills and skills in this area. However, I don't have a position available for them to use those skills. You have a position available, so you should be taking them from my department and putting them into your department. So that's word of mouth from inside of the workplace. Okay, then we also have external sources of recruitment, and it's important to remember that external means that it's coming from outside of the business, which again means that this is going to be information that a lot of people have access to. Where internal source of recruitment, only the people inside the workplace has access to that information. So the first external source of recruitment is going to be recruitment agencies. And these are agencies that will normally have a lot of people's information. So sometimes I can send my CV to a recruitment agency, and then a business will approach that particular recruitment agency and say, I'm looking for an accountant or a manager or a lawyer or a marketing expert. And then that recruitment agency will have a look at their database, at all the people who qualify for that particular position, and then they will give that information to the business. So what happens there is that one business will use the recruitment agency as a source for finding suitable candidates. And that does cost a lot of money because you have to pay the recruitment agency, but it can also save you a little bit of time because then you don't have to go out and find all the people find the people that you would like to fill that position. So recruitment agency is the first external source of recruitment.
Mr. De Klerk, also with recruitment agencies, you need to bear in mind they also do the initial screening. So they go through the CVs and they make sure those that comply, and they phone the references and all of those. So you don't need to spend the times with hours and hours and thousands of CVs that you need to go through. So they save you quite a bit of time.
Yeah, so it decreases the administration burden.
Exactly.
But obviously the downfall of that is that they don't know exactly what you're looking for. So sometimes they might view a particular person as not having the correct criteria, and then they discard that information. Whereas if you've seen it, perhaps you would have approached that person and say, come for an interview or something like that.
Exactly.
So there are benefits and obviously pitfalls of using the recruitment agent. And any source of recruiting has positives and negatives. Yeah. Okay, the next one is external headhunting. So again, the same process as headhunting was explained on the previous set of information, but now it's important here we have external headhunting. So somebody is approaching you from a different company, from outside of the organization, and they are approaching you and saying, we have this position available, we've heard about you, would you like to apply for this particular position? But that person is approaching you from outside of the business, which means that if you accept that interview and you get the job and you accept the job, you're going to leave your current place of work and then you're going to go and work for them. So then that is external headhunting. Then that happens quite a lot in the business world, where because of what people have achieved, they get headhunted by other people because they have a certain set of skills. So headhunting does happen quite often in the workplace. But it's important to remember that headhunting can be internal and external. So therefore, if you use this as an answer, you need to make sure that you are stating internal headhunting for internal sources of recruitment and external headhunting for external sources of recruitment. However, if you can remember more, so let's say you are asked to identify two of each and you can remember more, rather use a different option. Try then not to use headhunting twice, just to save you the burden of possibly losing the mark at the end of the year. Okay, then the next one is electronic media, which can be the radio, can be television, and this is where a particular vacancies or job are advertised on the radio. So I heard quite a few months ago, and quite often when listening to the radio, that the SABC radio is looking for an operations manager, or they're looking for a new DJ, or whatever position is available, then they advertise that on the radio. So then anybody listening to the radio at that stage will hear that, and if they are looking for that type of job, then they can apply. Obviously, you're going to lose the impact of that if the people that you are trying to attract are not listening to the radio station at that particular point in time. So if you do choose to use television advertisements or radio advertisements, then you would normally use those during prime time for radio, either when people are driving to and from work, or TV when people are watching TV at certain times of the day, so that you can maximize the impact of that electronic media. And obviously this is quite expensive as well. Prime time viewing costs a lot more than advertising when it's not prime time. But obviously you're paying for prime time viewing because that is the time when the majority of people are watching that particular programs or listening to that particular radio station. So it can be used quite well, but it is also quite expensive to use the radio as a form of external recruitment. The next one is billboards, and we can see this often on the side of the road. However, it's not used as often with regards to finding people to fill vacancies in the position. This billboards are often used for advertising products or advertising shops, but it can be used as or for looking to fill a vacancy. So you can use it as a source of recruitment, where you can advertise on a billboard that you are looking for people with a certain set of skills, but it is not a popular and it's not necessarily effective because this billboard is going to be in one place. So it means that you're going to rely on people driving past that particular billboard to see this billboard and apply for that particular vacancy. So although billboards are an option for external source of recruitment, it might not necessarily be a very popular one that is used. All right, then we have printed media, which and examples of this is newspapers, and normally in the classified section of the newspapers is where you're going to find a section of the newspaper where they are advertising all the jobs that are available. So in printed media, like the newspaper, that is where you'll find in the classified sections all the available jobs that are on offer, and then you can search through that and see what you are skilled to do, what you have the necessary qualifications for, and what you are interested in doing, and apply for the appropriate jobs through that process. And then the last one there, we have social media, which is also part of electronic source of recruitment. And social media has become very popular because social media is viewed by many people. There are various different applications that are used, and each business has their own Facebook page, each business has their own Instagram, Twitter, etc. And it is free for businesses to use these social media accounts. And a lot of businesses use this approach to advertise all the vacancies that they have available in their particular business because it's free, it's controlled by them, and you can reach a large amount of people through your various social media accounts. So those are the different sources of internal and external recruitment. Remember to read the questions carefully to find out whether they are asking you to identify internal or external sources, how many they're asking you for, and whether they're just asking you to list or name, or whether they're asking you to explain. Because when they're asking you to list or name, you're only going to get 1 mark for listing it or naming it. And when they're asking you to explain or discuss, then you're going to get 2 marks. Either they're going to be split marks, or they're going to be 2 marks added at the end for that particular answer over there. Okay, the next aspect we need to look at is the difference between job description and job specification. And quite often, if you look at the way the question was asked here, it says differentiate or distinguish between job description and job specification. So on our list of verbs, this would form part of the second list of verbs where the marks are split. And you can see on this particular slide that the marks have been split. And here you're going to have to make the statement and then clarify the statement to get the second mark. So if we look at job description, it's describing the duties and the responsibilities of a specific job. So you get the first mark for saying it describes the duties, and the second mark for saying as well as the responsibilities of the job. Then there's also a written description of the job and its requirements. So 1 mark for saying written description, of the job and the other mark for its requirements, and it describes the key performance areas and tasks for a specific job. So it describes what the duties are and what your responsibilities are. So it's basically what you are going to be doing if you have that particular job, whereas the job specification, it specifies the minimum acceptable qualities or skills or qualifications that is needed for the job. So it's the minimum skills that you need in order to do the job. So this is your requirements as to what you need to have to be able to apply for that particular job. It's your skills, it's your qualities, it's your qualifications that you have. And this is also a written description of those specific qualifications. So they'll say you need a BCom or a BEd or a MA or a PhD, depending on the type of job that is being advertised. In the job specification, they will specify what type of qualification it is that you will need in order to do that job. Obviously, it's a minimum requirement. So if you don't have that, you will not be able to apply for the job. So in order for you to apply for a particular job, you must meet all those minimum requirements in terms of the qualification, in terms of the experience, in terms of the skills that you need. And businesses use this approach by creating this minimum requirements to filter the number of applications that they get. So by default, they are eliminating everybody that does not have the minimum requirements for applying for that particular job. So that's why they clearly define this job specification so that they can streamline the amount of people that apply for the jobs, and they can eliminate those who don't qualify at the start of the process, because once they receive all the CVs and so on, they still have to screen all those responses and sort them into piles of people who qualify, who have the necessary requirements, and those who don't. So it helps them in their streamlining process for the application process. Okay, so that is the job description and the job specification, and it is quite a popular question. I would say you need to know at least 2 of the bullet points for job description and 2 of the bullet points for job specification. I suspect it might be worth between 4 to 8 marks. So if it's 4 marks, and you need to know one bullet point under job description, 1 bullet point under job specification, but I don't think it will be more than 8 marks. So make sure you know at least 2 of the bullet points under each of job description and job specification.
Mr. de Klerk, I think this is also a popular question to ask, whereby they give you a case study and you need to identify which ones they will normally give you an advertisement, and which ones will form part of job description and which ones will form part of job specification. There's normally 2, so it will end up counting about 4.
Yeah.
Because you just have to quote and identify.
That's correct. As Mr. Van Sale said, they'll normally give you a job an advertisement that they've got from the classified section from a newspaper or online or wherever. And in that, it will clearly give you a number of items like this is the amount of years experience you need, this is the qualifications that you need, this is what your job will entail, and so on. And then based on that advertisement that they give you, they will say identify one aspect that forms part of job description, or that is part of the job description, one aspect that is part of the job specification, or 2 or 3, however many they are asking you for. But they will give you, most likely, or they like to give you rather, should I say, they like to give you an example of an actual advertisement that they've taken from some type of source or media source. Newspapers are normally the easiest ones to find, and then they ask you to identify information from that. So it is an application type of question, so you're going to have to clearly know the difference between job description and job specification in order to identify from the advertisement what forms part of job description and what forms part of your job specification. Okay. So we're now going to look at the role of the interviewer and interviewees. Now it's important here to know the difference between the interviewer and the interviewee and what their roles are, because both the interviewer and the interviewees have responsibilities and duties that they have to conduct or do before the interview, and they have responsibilities during the interview. Now the interviewee is the person that's actually conducting the business. So if I was having a interview with Mr. Van Sale where I was asking him the questions, then I would be the interviewer and he would be the interviewee. So the interviewer is the person asking the question. I think I got that a bit mixed up. So let me just rectify what I said there. The interviewer is the person asking the questions, and the interviewee is the person that is going to be responding to the questions. So if I was asking Mr. Van Zyl questions, then he would be the interviewee because he's going to be responding, and I'm going to be the interviewer. And both of us have duties to fulfill before we even go to the interview and while we are in the interview as well. So let's quickly first look at the role of the interviewer. So this is the person that is going to be conducting the interview. So the person that's going to be asking all the questions during the interview. So the role of the interviewer before the interview is to firstly develop a set of questions. Now, what's important here is to know that the set of questions that will be asked is going to be a set of standard questions. So everybody that comes for that interview is going to answer those particular set of questions. There might be a few different questions that come up during the interview, but there are going to be a set of questions that must be answered by everybody, because part of the recruitment process is to ensure that everything is fair and equitable, giving everybody an equal chance. Therefore, you have to ask them all the same set of questions. Okay, so you're not limited to asking them these questions, because every interview is different and there'll be different questions that arise, but you must make sure that this specific set of questions that was designed by the interviewer is asked to everybody, so that you can judge everybody's response, because that's what you're going to use to help you in making your decision as to who you are going to employ. So you must develop a set of questions. Then you have to set a specific date and time. So you need to say, on this date and at this time, you are going to have your interview, and you need to communicate that to everybody involved in the interview process. Before the interview, you normally have to study the person's CV, and you normally study the person's CV to make sure that you understand who they are, what their experience is, what their qualifications are, what their skills are, and so on, so that when you are asking questions, you are not trying to find out then during the interview what they have done. You've already got a background to the person, so you know a little bit about themselves, and you're using the interview process just to clarify a few things. So you must study the person's CV, because it's part of already you knowing what they've done and what their skills are and what their qualifications are, because you don't need to necessarily waste time asking all those questions. You need to use that interview to ask important questions that's going to help you identify or what type of person it is that you want to have working for you. So you want to make sure you study the person's CV. Also, it's not going to look like you care about the interview process if you approach, or if you are in the interview and I say to Mr. Van Zyl, so Mr. Van Zyl, what's your qualifications? Mr. Van Zyl, how long have you been working here? Where have you worked before? Because it's going to show I've got no interest in you.
Yeah.
So part of studying the CV is to show that there is an interest in the person, because you also want to feel important if you're coming for an interview. Is that not so?
That is true. And what one also need to remember is that even if that person is either going to become your employee or is going to be a potential customer, so why would you want to muddy the water? So obviously you want to be seen as professional, as what the business images that you want to promote as well. So that person, when he either is not appointed, is going to be a customer, and he would always think back to your business as being a professional one that he would like to,
so
do business with.
Your interview is also going to build an impression of the company based on that interview.
That is absolutely
And then remember
true.
that person, if I don't treat you fairly in that interview, you're going to go to everybody that you know, and through word of mouth and through social media, I'm going to get a bad reputation, or
That's
my
true.
business will get a bad reputation. So part of studying the CV is to make sure that you show that you care about the person. You need to make them feel interested, because that person still has the right to say yes or no, I don't want to work for you, or I want to work for you. So you need to make them feel valued and important in the interview process. You actually need to make them feel like they are the person that you want to employ, because then you're going to make them feel comfortable and you're going to get the best out of the interview process, and that will help you to make your decision as to whether you would like to employ them or not. Okay, so we look at the next role of the interviewer before the process is to book a suitable venue. Now, every interview process is also different, so you need to book a venue that is appropriate for the type of interview that you're going to have. So I remember when I went for an interview for my current job that I have, it was just the principal of the school that interviewed me. There wasn't a panel, so therefore the interview venue was a small, intimate office which had a table, and each of us sat on either end of the table. So the room itself wasn't intimidating. So because the venue was suitable, it was a one-on-one interview. I felt fairly comfortable, and then when I was comfortable, I was able to respond to the questions better. So it's important to have the correct venue, because how you feel will determine how you answer the question.
And that making the interviewee feel at ease is actually very important, because then you will get the answers that you are looking for. Because a skilled interviewer will take that into consideration as well. You can also imagine, if I need to interview a person, I ask them to get me at the nearest bar or 7-Eleven or something, it doesn't create a very good impression. So the impression is also very important, once again.
So when you're booking a suitable venue, you need to see what do I want from this person in my interview process. And I was at another interview before I started teaching. So when I finished my studies, I went to an interview, and I was placed in the school hall. And they had a panel of interviewers who each had a chance to ask their question. But now you must imagine a big hall that can normally seat between 400 to 500 people. And in the middle of the hall, they put a set of tables where they were all sitting next to each other, and I was sitting in the middle.
Yeah.
So I actually felt like I was in the court of law being
Exactly.
judged. And I felt so uncomfortable in that interview, and the space is so big, but here we are using the small part of the hall, and everybody's just sitting there. I felt so judged, and I felt so uncomfortable, and I don't think I answered the questions very well, because I definitely did not hear from them after that particular interview, but that venue was not appropriate.
Exactly. No, it must be inviting, and it must the appropriateness is always your employee must be at ease.
Okay, so we need to move on. The last one there is you need to contact the shortlisted candidates as well as contact the panel of interviewers. Obviously, if you are the interviewer, you don't need to contact yourself, but if you have a group of people that are going to be conducting the interview, you need to make sure that everybody involved as the interviewer is contacted and say, we are meeting on this date, on this time, at this venue, so that they know where to be. You need to contact the interviewees as well, or the candidates, so that they also know that you are meeting at a specific venue at a specific time. And this is normally done telephonically and then confirmed via email. So they'll, just to get the personal touch, you normally phone the person and say, we want to interview you. Are you available on this day at this time? And then you say, and then they say yes or no. And then you tell them, thank you very much. We'll meet on this day at this time at this venue. And I will send you a confirmation email so that they can book it in their calendar and make sure that they are available. It just creates a professional image, and it keeps the personal touch as well. So that's the role of the interviewer before the interview process, right? And as I said, each interviewer and interviewee has roles before and after the interview. But what's important here is that you need to read the question. So when you get a question at the end of the year, identify, are they talking about the interviewer, or are they talking about the interviewee? Because that will have an impact on how you answer the question. And are they talking about before the interview, or are they talking about after the interview? Because there's been lots of cases where we've marked scripts and we've seen that this person has studied, they know their work. The question said, discuss the role of the interviewer before the interview. And the answer they gave was, discuss the role of the interviewer during the interview, which means that everything is going to be incorrect. So don't let your effort go to waste by misreading questions. Make sure that when you read the particular question about roles of interviewer and interviewees, identify who are they talking about, interviewer or interviewee, and when, before or after the process. Don't let this silly mistake cost you a lot of marks in the examination.
So this is also important to note. They may ask this question in the following form. How should an interviewer prepare for the interview? Prepare means before. So you need to look, they won't necessarily tell you just it is before, but you need to judge the sentence to know whether this is either before or during or after.
after.
So be very careful with this, because it might be a 6-mark question, and it's actually 6 very, very easy marks.
It might
But
even be part of your essay question where it counts 10 or 12 marks.
Yeah.
So it's
and
a place
then
to score marks.
and it's lost.
Yes.
Because just not interpreting
The question correctly. Right. Then you are also asked to outline, explain, or discuss the role of the interviewer and the interviewee during the interview. So those are two things we're going to focus on now: the role of the interviewer and interviewee during the interview. Now, the way the question has been asked in your workbook, it says outline, explain, or discuss. And if they use the word outline, the role of the interviewer or interviewer, it's going to be 2 marks at the end of the statement. So you're not going to have to clarify what you're going to say. You just have to have the main essence of what you want to say in your statement. But if they say explain or discuss, then you're going to have to clarify your statement. So then you'll make your statement and you're going to clarify it. So the way I've outlined it in the slide is for discuss or explain, where I'm showing you how the marks have been split. But just remember, if they just say outline, the 2 marks will be at the end, but I'm just showing you how the marks will be split. So during the interview, you're going to try and allocate the same amount of time to each candidate to ensure fairness. Remember, fairness and equity is important during the interview process. Everybody must have the same opportunity. So therefore, you're going to try as far as possible to ensure that everybody gets the same time to answer or to have their particular interview. Obviously, interviews are all different, as I said, and it might be a little bit longer or shorter depending on how people are answering the questions or responding to the questions. But generally, you're going to have a set period of time that you're going to allocate to everybody where you ask them the same set of questions. Then you also have to introduce all the members to the panel, if there is a panel. So if you have a number of people that are with you and conducting the interview with you, you have to introduce them to say, this is who they are, this is their role they perform. It's also just professional and makes the person feel a little bit more comfortable. I would prefer to answer questions when I know who I am talking to and what their role is. I don't want to answer questions when I don't know what your purpose is or what you are doing or what role you play in the organization, because that's going to impact how I answer my particular question. So that's the second bullet point there, where you introduce the members of the panel. The third one is to try to make the interviewee feel comfortable so that they can answer the questions in the best possible way. And we've already explained this, and Mr. Van Zyl has already confirmed this and consolidated what I said, that you need to try and make the person feel comfortable so that they can be at ease, and then they can answer the question as best as they possibly can. Because many people have felt so uncomfortable that they've actually messed up their interviews, but they were potentially the right person for that job. So as the interviewer, you must make the person feel as comfortable as possible so that you can get the best type of response for them, so that you can make the most informed decision as to who you are employing. Okay, the next point, it says make a record of the interviewee's answers for future reference. So during the interview process, you might find that the interviewer or the interviewers, if there is a panel of people doing the interview, they might be jotting down a few notes here and there where they are just monitoring how you answered, because they're going to compare that to the other people that they are interviewing, how those people have answered the question. So you must make a highlight, or you must highlight some important information that sets this person, maybe sets them apart, or maybe is a clear indication to you that you don't want to employ that particular person. But you must make notes, because you're going to use that to compare to the other people that come to the interview. And then the last point there is you're going to close the interview by thanking the candidate and informing them as to when they can expect feedback. Now, this is very important. You can't just say, thank you very much for coming, we will let you know. Because that is then an open-ended date. So that person doesn't know when to expect an answer. And Mr. Van Zyl, it's important, I think, to explain why you must say by this date we will give a response, because then the person knows when this date arrives, if I've heard nothing, maybe I was unsuccessful and therefore I should find alternative opportunities. Or on the other hand, I might be going to 3 or 4 different interviews. And if you don't tell me when I can expect a response, then I might get an offer somewhere else. And because I don't know when to expect a response from you, I accept that offer, and now I'm going to be employed by that company. But I actually wanted to be with you, with your company. So it's important then to tell that person when they can expect some type of response, whether it's positive or negative, and in what form they're going to receive that.
And also
response.
very important to note, if you do offer them a date by when they will hear, you better keep to it.
Yes.
Okay, the moment you say to a person you will get a response, you would have to deliver, because that is part of professionalism.
Yes.
But if I tell a person you're going to hear from that date and I don't arrive, what do they think of me? Once again, professionalism is what it's about. But there are certain cases where it's acceptable to indicate that if you haven't heard by a certain date, then you can accept that your application was unsuccessful. And that is acceptable, especially if you've got loads and loads of employees that you interview.
Yeah, I've seen that quite often in advertisements where it's a particular job where you're going to have thousands of people applying for that job, because there are thousands of people that will have that set of skills. So then you're actually saving yourself a lot of time, because if you have to contact everybody, that's going to take a lot of time and effort and money and administration, and a lot of companies actually do that. So if you have not heard by this date, 31st of July, assume that your application has been unsuccessful.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's also at least a date.
That's true, but normally with an interview, you are working with only a selected few people that you want to sift out the screening process, so to speak. So it's not going to be the same as getting in CVs, because with the CV you cannot phone every unsuccessful candidate back. That's merely impossible. But you can do that though where you've got an interview where I've interviewed 10 or 15 or so people. I think it would be just a courtesy to let them know.
To let them know personally, because
it has not been successful.
They've made it through the first round. So
exactly.
Yeah. And it's also important to make sure that you don't interview too many people on the same day, because interview processes are also exhausting. So you normally have, maybe, depending on the type of job, you might have 1 or 2 interviews, maybe 3 interviews a day, because it takes a long time. You want to make sure that you give each person the opportunity. You don't want to have 15 interviews in one day, and by the time you get to the 5th or 6th interview, you're so tired that you don't actually listen to everybody else's responses. So you need to make sure that you have an appropriate amount of people that you are interviewing at that specific point of time. All right, so that's the role of the interviewer during the interview. Then we look at the role of the interviewee during the interview, and again, they can just say outline. If they say outline, the marks will be allocated at the end of the statement, but again, I've shown you how they will break down the marks if they say explain or discuss. So you're going to greet the interviewer by name, because at that stage you will know who is interviewing you, and you normally have a solid handshake or a friendly smile. Obviously, if you were going to go for an interview during the COVID-19 period, then there's not going to be any handshakes or formal, you're not going to be able to touch the person. You might not actually be able to be in the same room. You might do it online, but you're still going to greet and be polite, just to create the atmosphere at the beginning of that interview process. So you're going to normally greet the interview by name with a solid handshake or with a friendly smile, so that already the interviewee and the interviewer feel comfortable in that situation. Then the next point, you're going to listen carefully to the question that is asked. So now I'm being asked the question as the interviewee. I need to listen carefully and think before I answer the question. So I must take a moment or two just to make sure, do I understand the question? And then how do I respond to it? So you can't just rush into answering the question, because then it shows you're not thinking it, and you might not be able to, might not be responding to that question appropriately. Also, if you're not sure as to what the question is that is being asked, so there's maybe something that's ambiguous or unclear, you can actually ask for clarification and say, is this what you are asking me? Because then it shows that you have listened, it shows that you have thought about it, and it also gives you an opportunity to answer the question correctly, because one of the criteria that the human resource manager uses is they assess whether you're able to answer questions correctly, and if you can't answer the questions correctly, that's also going to disadvantage you in a certain way as part of their criteria in terms of measuring you during the interview process. Okay, the next point over there, it says you must make eye contact and ensure that you have good body language. So positive body language is quite important, because it also shows how you hold yourself and what presence you have in the room. Okay, and body language is different for everybody, so you must be aware of what you are doing. Do you raise your hands wildly? Do you talk loudly? Do you sit with a slouch, or this doesn't look unprofessional if I sit like this? Okay, so I need to sit properly, speak, project my voice, and so on, because it's all about showing a professional image, because that is also part of how you're being judged. You're not just being judged on what's being said, you're also being judged on your physical body language.
Yeah.
Okay?
It's actually been said that that a person communicates 90% of the meaning not by what he has said or the words that he has spoken but by all the other gestures and means. And people pick up on those on those clues.
Yeah.
And it's very important that we are well aware of how we project.
Correct. And then the fourth bullet point over there, be honest about your mistakes and explain how you dealt with them. So don't lie, don't try and cover up things that have gone wrong in your past. Be open, explain what the mistake was, and most importantly, explain how you dealt with that mistake, because how you dealt with that mistake shows your professionalism, shows the quality that you have, shows what type of person you are, and it helps the business decide whether you are somebody that they want to employ. So there's nothing wrong with having made mistakes in the past. It's all about how you have responded to those mistakes and what measures you have put in place after those mistakes, because that's also building your character and who you are. And that is another thing that a business will use to judge whether they want to employ you or not. Okay, and the last one there, it says ask for clarity on any question that you don't understand or whether you are unsure about that. And that we have spoken about already previously, where you just make sure you understand exactly what has been said.
There's just one more thing that I would like to draw the learner's attention to. I've seen it plenty of times before in an exam paper at the end of the year, where they would answer here, dress formally or dress appropriately. Now, boys and girls, this is exactly what the during and before mean. You are not going to get dressed during an interview. So therefore, they cannot accept that response. But getting ready for an interview, preparing for an interview is where the dress thing comes in. So it's just important to note.
All right, so that's the role of the interviewer and the interviewee during the interview process. But again, just make sure when you see questions on interviewers and interviewees, identify who are they speaking about and what process, at which point in the process. Is it before the interview or in preparation, as Mr. Van Zyl has highlighted? So there's your keywords, before the interview or in preparation of the interview. That's going to be before, and then obviously during or while the interview is being conducted. Okay, next we're going to look at the implications of certain acts on the business and on the HR function specifically. And we're going to look at the implications of the Labor Relations Act, the implications of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the implications of the Employment Equity Act, and the Skills Development Act. But what's important here is understanding what the term implications of a particular act has on the HR function. It's not the HR's function to ensure that the business is conducting all or making sure that every condition of the particular law is in place and they are making provisions. It's just how they comply with the Labor Relations Act or the Employment Equity Act or the Basic Conditions. So when we see implications of a specific act on the HR function, make sure that you understand that when they say implications, it is how does the HR function comply with that particular law that they're asking for. And what's important here is to understand that normally, and I've done a bit of research on this and I've looked at quite a few past papers, normally when they ask you for a question, an essay question specifically on human resources, they will normally ask for one of the implications of one of the acts on the HR function. So it will always be an aspect, or it seems like it will always be an aspect of the essay question. So make sure that in preparation for your examinations that you are able to also answer an essay question where you are saying, or you are able to explain the implication or how the HR function can comply with all the different acts that we have to comply with. Okay, so the first one there is the implications of the labor relations on the HR function. And again, it says discuss or evaluate the impact that the sorry, not that. It says discuss or explain the implications of the Labor Relations Act on the HR function. So workers cannot easily be dismissed, and you get your 1 mark for that. So because the verb was explain or discuss, you're going to have to clarify the statement. So the statement is workers cannot easily be dismissed. Why can't they be easily dismissed? Because there's bargaining that needs to take place either through the CCMA or through the trade unions. All those third parties need to be involved in the dismissal of a person. It also provides a framework for bilateral meetings. This just means that it allows for meetings to take place between either your bargaining council as your trade union or your lawyer or your CCMA if you are taking your case to the CCMA. It allows a meeting to happen between the employer, the business, the employee, the person who has been dismissed unfairly, as well as their representative counsel, which might be their trade union or the CCMA or their private lawyer if that is the route that they are taking. So it allows for that meeting to take place. The next point over there says that the human resource manager must allow workers to form workplace forums or belong to trade unions to promote the interest of employees. So you get the 1 mark for saying that they must be able to join a workplace forum or be able to join a trade union of their choice. Why? Because they want to promote the well-being of their employees. And then it promotes orderly negotiations. So it makes sure that whenever negotiations are happening, that it is a fair and an orderly, there's an order in which things are done. There's a process that must be followed. And employee participation in decision-making in the workplace. So it's important that employees are allowed to be part of decision-making at certain levels, because you must remember when employees are part of a decision-making process, it means that they will buy into that decision a bit easier than if they were just given that particular instruction or been told what the decision was. Okay, then it also protects the rights of employees or employers as outlined by the Constitution. So you must remember that both the business as well as the employee has rights that is protected by the Labor Relations Act.
To give you one example of a right that both employees and employers may have in this act, employees have the right to strike if negotiations is in dead fall. But, so to speak, the employers also has a right to lock them out.
Correct.
So there's rights and responsibilities for both parties here, because remember, with the Labor Relations Act, it's about keeping the relationship between the employers, employees, and then, of course, the state together.
Correct. Okay, then you also have to explain the implications of the Employment Equity Act on the HR function. And again, I've split the marks so you can see this, and I'll go through this very quickly. The human resource manager must promote or provide equal opportunities in the workplace, because that is one of the aims of the Employment Equity Act, to promote equality amongst all employees. It ensures that there is affirmative action and that it promotes diversity in the workplace. Compiles the employment equity plans that need to be followed and indicates how they will be implemented with regards to affirmative action. It also assigns a manager to ensure that the employment equity plan will be implemented regularly as well as being monitored regularly. And then finally, it reports to the Department of Labor on the progress of the implementation of the Employment Equity Act. Then we have...
sorry, Mr. De Klerk, sorry that I'm doing this, but I think it's very important. You see that the word there is implications. Now, there's a difference between an implication and an impact. An implication basically refers to what the HR function should do.
Yes, so how they should comply.
How they should comply. What should they do? Where an impact could be either a positive impact or a negative. It affects me either positively or negatively. But implications refers to things that I need to do.
Correct.
I either compile a report now that I need to send to the Director General or something. That's an implication.
Correct. So the implication always happens while you are doing the process or before the process, where the impact's always after.
Yes, that's correct.
The result of,
yes,
you could say.
That's a very good way of saying
okay.
it.
Right, so then we have the implications of the Skills Development Act. I'll just show this briefly here, because again, you will have this in your core notes. I'm not going to go through every point over here. I'll just read through it quickly. So human resource manager must interpret all the aims of the Skills Development Act and adapt the workplace skills accordingly so that they meet those requirements of the Skills Development Act. They must identify the training needs of the employees and provide them with training opportunities so that they can perform their tasks properly and efficiently. And they must contribute 1% of the salary bill to the Skills Development Act. So here, this is 1% of the salary bill. So whatever your expense is for employing people in your business, 1% or an amount equal to 1% of that must be allocated to the skills development levy, and that's the money that will be used to ensure that your staff get adequate training. Because remember, when you're qualified to do something, it doesn't mean that you stop learning. Things change, processes change, technology changes, so your staff continuously needs to develop their skills, and that will come from the skills development levy. So 1% of whatever the wage bill is needs to be contributed to the skills development levy. Okay? And then we have the next point over there, to ensure that training in the workplace happens and it's formalized and it is structured. What's important there is that it's formalized and it is structured. You can't just decide randomly, I'm going to have training on this today and training on that today. It needs to be a structured program to show what the way is forward and how the learning will take place in the business there.
Mr. De Klerk, sorry. I think that's also important to note, since we've done the Skills Development Act a bit earlier, it needs to lead to a qualification.
Correct.
So when another employer looks at the skills that people that worked for me built up, and they provide a certificate to get a specific job, it must be trustworthy. They need to know that if they have completed this is the skills that they should have. So therefore, it is a formalized structure, because it needs to lead to an organized qualification that is accepted in the NQF levels.
Correct. And that also links to the CETAs, where the CETAs ensure that the quality of education is appropriate, and therefore that certificate holds value.
Exactly.
And we often see this in the workplace. For example, if someone has to go for first aid training, then they'll get a certificate once they've completed that, and that's going to be done through a registered company that has met the criteria that perhaps was designed by the CETAs to ensure that the quality of what is learned, it can be trusted. And then that person can take that certificate and have it as part of their CV. And when I see that person's CV, I can see this is what they've done, this is the qualification they've received or the training that they've received, and this is a recognized source. So I can trust that.
Exactly. So it's not just the person up the road that has had some experience with people that got hurt that now helps you, and now all of a sudden you've received training.
Yes.
It's nothing like that. It must be a formalized way.
Okay, and then the last point over there, you must appoint a full-time or part-time consultant as a skills development facilitator, and this person's primary role is going to be focusing on what are the training needs in the business, where do we fall short, and how do we train our staff to make sure that they have all the necessary skills. And then the last implication there, or the last way in which the HR function must comply with, is the last law that they must comply with is the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. And Mr. Van Zyl has gone through all these provisions that have been made. So it's the amount of hours that a person can work in a 5 or 6 day week, the amount of overtime that they're allowed to work, when they must have their breaks and so on. So we're not going to go through all these provisions, because Mr. Van Zyl spoke about all these provisions in his description of what provisions are made for by the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So with regards to the implications of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act on the HR function, or how the HR function should comply with the BCEA, that is purely the provisions that are made with regards to sick leave, with regards to the amount of hours worked, with regards to your overtime and so on. Okay, so that makes it a little bit easier to remember that information there. Okay, then we have this idea of fringe benefits, which we briefly discussed earlier, where it's an added benefit. So a fringe benefit is an added benefit that's not it's not part of your normal remuneration package, so to say, or it might be part of your remuneration package, but it's not your salary. So your salary is what you would normally earn. Fringe benefits is in addition to your salary, and there are various reasons as to why businesses would want to offer you fringe benefits. And it might be things like they transport you to work. It might be things like they provide your refreshments at work. It might be things like they give you recreational facilities at work. And each of that's going to
Or
have a
just a
specific
staff
target.
discount.
Or a staff discount. Or
It doesn't have to be necessarily in the form of money.
Yes.
It's what you get on top
what you
of.
get on top of it. Or it could be a lot of businesses give petrol allowances or different allowances, especially for people like salespeople that travel a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are lots of added benefits that the business gives, and why they normally give this is to ensure that employees who are currently with them are happy and that they stay with the business, because you don't want to have a large staff turnover, because that means you're going to have to employ more people and you're going to have to retrain all those people and so on. So you want to ensure that the current staff you have are happy, and fringe benefits are or forms part of making your staff happy. And you also want to attract potentially good employees. So when they see these are the benefits that you offer, then it makes them want to come and work for your businesses. Those are normally the reasons as to why businesses will employ or will adopt and have fringe benefits in the business. So let's quickly look at the advantages and disadvantages. So remember that they again say using the word impact. So impact again means positive and negative. So you must be careful with the questions here. If they say just explain the positive impact, then you can only speak about the positives. If they say explain the negative impact, you can only speak about the negatives. But if they just say discuss the impact, then you can decide, are you going to speak about the positives or the negatives, or a combination of both of those. Okay? So positives is that it improves productivity because staff are happy, and when productivity increases, it also increases your profitability.
Maybe it's important to note here that when we deal with a question like this, now it's also a statement and a qualifier, but your statement is either positive or negative, and now for your qualifier you say why is it negative or why is it positive. Okay, so that's just important to note.
Okay. All right. It increases the employee satisfaction. Why does it increase the employee satisfaction? Because they may be willing to go the extra mile because of the benefit that they're receiving, or the fringe benefit that they're receiving from the business. The business might save money, as some benefits are tax deductible. Okay, so the statement is they save money. Why do they save money? Because some benefits might be tax deductible. And then fringe benefits can be used as leverage for salary negotiation and so on. So the business might tell you that we can't pay you more, or we can only give you a certain percentage increase for your salary, but these are the added benefits that you are going to get if you carry on working for us. So they say we might not be able to reward you financially, but we can reward you in another way. We can give you more leave days. We can change your working hours. We can make things a bit more comfortable for you. We can increase allowances in different areas. So then that can make up for shortfalls of the financial benefit you might receive during the negotiations of your salary. Then we have the negative impact or the disadvantages, and that is businesses who can't afford fringe benefits might fail to attract skilled workers. So if you don't have extra benefits that you might offer your employees, people might choose not to work at your business or apply for positions that become available there. It can create conflict or lead to corruption if it is allocated unfairly. Fringe benefits are also additional costs, which may result in cash flow problems. So remember, when you are giving somebody a fringe benefit, you are paying for that as a business. So it's an added expense, which means that you have then less money, and that cash flow is the amount of money you actually have available to spend. So if you're spending more money on fringe benefits, you have less money to spend on other things that you need to build or to grow your business a bit further. And the last point there, it decreases the profits. And why does it decrease the profit? Because there's a cost that is associated with providing the various fringe benefits there. And normally in the examination, they will link the fringe benefits to the job description and job specification. So they will have, as part of the advertisement, in that question, they will also have, they'll say what they will, or they'll mention all the jobs or the items that form part of job specification. They'll mention the items that form part of job description. And then they will explain what the fringe benefit are. It could be a housing allowance, could be a car allowance, or whatever benefit they want to give. And then as part of that question, so the first part will be identify job specification, identify something that's part of job description. Then they'll say mention fringe benefits. And then they will normally ask why or what is the benefit or what is the impact, positive or negative impact of the fringe benefits. So that's how the question is normally linked together. It's quite a popular way of asking that question over there. Okay, then the last aspect of human resources that we're going to look at is, or not the last aspect, one of the next aspect is going to be the reasons for termination of contracts. Now again, it depends on how the question is asked. If they just say list the different reasons for terminating the contract, then that's going to be worth 1 mark, and then you can just say resignation, retirement, retrenchment, dismissal, death, or promotion. Okay, so if they say just list or give or name, then you just mention it. You don't have to give a full sentence describing what you are saying. Then when it comes to, if they say explain or discuss reasons, now you're going to have to start clarifying what you are saying, because then you'll get 1 mark for saying resignation or retirement or retrenchment, and then 1 mark for explaining what it is. Or they might give you the name, say, what does retrenchment mean, or what does retirement mean, and so on. So let's look at these items quickly. The first one is resignation. So this is a person's choice. It's voluntary. If I resign, I choose to leave my job. Okay, so that's the description of resignation, where someone voluntarily chooses to leave their place of employment where they are currently working. So it's on a voluntary basis. They weren't asked to leave. They weren't dismissed or fired, as we put it. They choose to leave. And this normally happens when they are unhappy and they choose not to work at all, or they're going on a different career path, or they find employment elsewhere. Then they're going to resign from their current place of work. The next one there was retirement. And with retirement, a person reaches a predetermined age. So now in your notes, you will see it says predetermined age. And that is different for every organization, because some organizations would insist that you retire at the age of 65. Some say that you can go on retirement from the age of 60. And some people say that, or they don't have a retirement age, depending on the difference. That's why they say a predetermined age. So each business will have their predetermined age, but generally speaking, it's the age of 65 that is generally regarded as, or between 60 and 65 is generally regarded as the time when people will retire. So when they reach that age, according to the predetermined retirement age by the business and the terms of your contract, then they will then stop working at that point, and then they will go on, or then they will start earning a pension. And on that point, a lot of people say pensioners or pension is a reason for terminating the contract, and that's not accepted as an answer. So when it comes to reasons for terminating the contract, you can't say pension, because pension is a monthly payment that you receive once you have retired. Okay, so they don't stop working because of pension, they stop working because of retirement. So when you're answering this question, you can't use pension as an answer, right? You have to use the word retirement there. Then the next one was retrenchment. So when people are retrenched, they're either retrenched because they are no longer needed in the workplace, they might no longer have the skills, or they are overstaffed and so on, or the business gets liquidated and they're going to have to retrench their staff. And that's what's happening with, or might be happening with SAA at the moment, because that is in discussions where there might have been quite a bit of retrenchments with regards to SAA. And that's because the company is not very liquid, which means they don't have money to operate. They're looking for a loan or some sort of loan from the government that's going to bail them out, and then they can continue operating. So when the company is getting liquidated, then often the staff will be retrenched, which means that you're going to lose your job, but you're going to get some form of retrenchment package, which is a financial benefit, which will cover you until you can find your next job that you might have. And the next one there is dismissal. And dismissal takes place when you are dismissed or fired, as a lot of people like to put it. You are dismissed for a valid reason. And this dismissal could be because you have done something that is illegal or unethical, and it goes against the policies of the business, or you are dismissed for a valid reason. So there must be a valid reason as to why you were told that you are no longer going to be employed by this particular business. So dismissal comes with a valid reason as to why you have been employed, and it could be because you have gone against the policies of the business, you have been conducting illegal or fraudulent activities, and therefore you have lost your job, you have been fired or dismissed. Okay, but we prefer that you use the word dismissed rather than saying fired. Okay, although it might be accepted, but try to use the word dismissal because you want to also use the correct language. Then
So, do I understand it correctly, Mr. de Klerk? If you say retrenchment, no mistake from the employee side. He didn't do anything wrong to be dismissed. But dismissal, he has done something wrong.
Correct.
Either gross misconduct or repeated incompetence, and he doesn't react to the way we've treated, we have trained him, and it just doesn't come right. So
Correct.
He cannot fulfill his contract.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and then we have death, which it sounds very bad. Obviously, it is. But obviously, if the person has died, you have to cancel their contract because they cannot be at work. They no longer are alive. So death is another reason for terminating the contract. And another one is promotion. Now, this is not in your notes, but if you promote somebody in your business, so let's say I was a junior manager and I get promoted to becoming a general manager, then I sign a new contract for my new position. So then my original contract gets terminated and I sign a new contract. So even though I'm working for the same company, I'm working in a different capacity. So I then start a new contract and my previous contract has been cancelled. Okay? But I have not been dismissed. I'm still working for that company. So those are the reasons for terminating the contract. Okay, then we're now going to look at the purpose of induction, or as it sounds, introduction. So induction is introduction, introducing the employee to the place of work. And you are often asked to explain or discuss the purpose of induction. And again, depending on the verb that is used, because in your booklet it says outline. So if they say outline, it's going to be 2 marks at the end. If they say explain, it's going to be split like I have split it over here. So again, I've shown how the marks will be split. So induction is basically you introducing your employee to their new workplace. So you're going to introduce them to the area that they're working in, the people who they're going to be working with. You're going to introduce them to the different policies of the business. You're going to introduce them to all the different areas. You're going to show them how the equipment works. You're just going to basically introduce them to everything and make them feel comfortable. And as we explained in the slide over here, it's just introducing them to the management or their colleagues to establish a relationship. So you introduce them to the colleagues. Why? Because you want to establish a relationship at the different levels. You make new employees feel welcome. How do you make them feel welcome? By introducing them to their physical workspace, so the area that they're going to be performing their tasks. You're going to give the employee a tour around the business to make them familiar to their surroundings. So that's why you would give them a tour. You familiarize them, the new employees, with the structure, the format, the policies, etc. And then you allow the new employee to ask questions, so that will allow them to put them at ease as well. That last point is very important there, because it's not just about you introducing them to the business. It's also about questions that they might have which make them feel uneasy, because as you're going through processes, the new person is learning a lot of new information, and a lot of information might get lost. So then they will have a chance to then ask all those questions just to make them feel comfortable, because if they're not comfortable, it's going to take a long time for them to settle, and then they're not going to be as productive as they possibly could. So the quicker you can get them comfortable in the business using the induction process, then the quicker they will become productive members of your institution. Okay? So that is the purpose of introduction. And then the aspects of introduction, these are normally asked. So it says state or outline. So if it says state, it's going to be worth 1 mark. If it says outline, it will be 2 marks at the end. So the aspects that are normally included in the induction program is introducing them to key people and to their immediate colleagues who they will be working with, explaining the safety regulations and rules, overview of how the business works, a tour of the premises or a tour of the workplace itself, a discussion of the employment contract and a discussion of their employment contract and conditions of service, so that they are sure and certain as to what their contract entails and what they should be doing. A discussion of employee benefits, and those are the fringe benefits that we have spoken about. and information about the business itself or any products, just to make sure the person knows exactly what they are speaking about. Okay, so that covers the human resources aspect of what we are looking at. We're going to have a quick break or another time to stretch your legs, and we come back with the final section of work that we look at.